Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Futurum Tech Webcast. I'm your host, Daniel Newman, Principal Analyst, Founding Partner at Futurum Research. Excited about this Futurum Tech Webcast interview series where I have Yoshi Takahashi from Fujitsu. He's going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about a lot of things across the technology, software, open source, hybrid cloud, and all kinds of different things, and learn a lot more about Fujitsu, a company that's well known around the planet, but certainly doing a lot of interesting things that maybe everybody out there does or does not know about. But excited to have you all here. So without further ado, I'm going to have Yoshi join me. Yoshi, hello and welcome to the show.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you very much for the introduction. Just let me introduce myself. I belong to the digital software and solution BG within Fujitsu. At this moment, I'm responsible for like a supercomputer, AI, the quantum computing, a digital shift, all the advanced technology within Fujitsu. So very excited to be here.
Yeah, that's a lot of things that I think about every day. Supercomputing, quantum, software, hybrid, all these different things going on. And it's all really because our world story is being told through data, and the rapid proliferation of data creates all kinds of new complexities and opportunities. And I'm sure in your world, Yoshi, that's driving a lot of what your business is focused on. So, hey, for everybody out there that's tuning into the show, I love these kinds of interviews. Just want to say, strap in. We're going to start big. We're going to think about some big, wide topics. We're going to learn a little bit more about what Fujitsu is focusing on, but we're also going to talk about a broad data story and what's going on, kind of as I just mentioned. And then as you get through this and get towards the end of the story, we're going to talk a little bit more about Fujitsu specifically. And Yoshi here is going to be your tutor. He's going to tell you everything you need to know. And it's going to be, I promise you, super interesting. So, I guess I'm going to start with a really broad question for you, Yoshi. I want to talk a little bit about what you guys kind of talk about as your 7 key focus areas for growth. We're in a world that's rapidly changing. I've set the stage. Tech is an integral part. But, from your standpoint, from Fujitsu, how does your company's vision and focus basically meeting the challenges in this changing world? And with all the data and all these implications of automation, machine learning, and more, what are you guys focusing in on?
Yeah, actually, I think the world is kind of undergoing a lot of changes right now with COVID-19. There's a lot of necessity of the remote automation, the usage of technology, AI. So I think it's kind of we're in the kind of a very unique moment in the world where we have to kind of change rapidly. Especially within Fujitsu, we have defined 7 key focus areas that associates to like how do we tackle the sustainable manufacturing? How do we best give experience to the consumer, the trusted society, and healthy living? These we talk about the 4 vertical areas, and of course, the digital shift, the data. How do we manage data across all these verticals? That becomes very important. So imagine like a supply chain. Within this kind of a COVID-19, there's a lot of glitches around supply chain. Using automation like a quantum computing, how do we kind of best bring the efficiency in the supply chain, including again the demand forecast? Using AI, how can we kind of increase the efficiency of supply chain so that we can kind of bring CO2 emission free? That's one area. Another area is in the healthy living, Daniel. With the COVID-19, that drug discovery usually takes like 15 years, and the cost per drug medicine is about $2 billion average. Imagine if you can kind of squeeze the time to market to half using computing technology. Imagine the cost and what does the people benefit from the faster drug discovery of COVID-19. So those are the challenges that we are trying to do within Fujitsu. And obviously the key essential part of Fujitsu is resolving these social issues using technology. That's about Fujitsu's kind of Uvance.
Yeah, and you mentioned, pretty quickly there across the 7 different focus areas. And you also started alluding a little bit towards the future. By the way, for anybody that's, been enduring the last couple of years, I think enduring is probably the right word. COVID-19, I think a lot of us thought maybe it would be a week, maybe it would be a month. And now we are here 2 years later, and we still don't have any certainty. But one of the things I can certainly tell you as an industry analyst working with many of the world's most exciting innovators was that technology has actually been a key in helping us to get to more rapid solutions, looking at drug compounds. You mentioned the power of high performance computing and supercomputers. You mentioned quantum computing, the ability that this is going to help us solve problems, everything from improving the way humans migrate and mobility to being able to expedite the time to discover possible drug compounds that could help us deal in the future with something like this. We're in a world, Yoshi, of immediate gratification. And so, of course, in our world, we wanted, someone to put some data into a supercomputer and spit out the other end a new drug that we could have had manufactured and, at our doorstep. But in to be candid, the development of vaccines and the development of antivirals has actually been done in breakneck time. And it's been a very impressive outcome. So, I'd love for you to allude a little bit more, talk a little bit more, opine a little bit more about that. You guys have what's kind of like the world in 2030, as you like to talk about it. So you referenced a few things. What do you think the next 10 years with all this data, with all this, the utilization, the activation, and of course, all this hardware that's being built on, what should we expect?
Yeah, Daniel, I think it's more of like all the enterprise institutions or like maybe the public sector. The data will become like a core of like everything. That means, let's say, in the past 5 to 10 years ago, I think the world was more into like a lift and shift, like for the total cost operation optimization. The people were kind of gathering the data into cloud, and I think that was to kind of search for the operational efficiency. But more and more, it's not about just a simple lift and shift, but it's about leveraging the data for the advanced computing to derive output. So I think it comes to the point where like data needs to be kind of combined. How do we leverage the open source data in a very secure format to make sure that the enterprise or institutions are able to deliver result? And one important point is about more and more institution or like enterprise customers, they have to leverage data to bring or themselves into a more dynamic data-driven organization. I think that's very important.
Yeah, I like that you brought that security word up too, because I think that's one of the things that we're also learning as data continues to proliferate and become more and more exponential in all of our lives, is that it's the responsibility of these enterprises that are the stewards of all of our data, whether that's social media and tools that we all use as consumers or apps that we use to shop. And then, of course, the enterprise data that we mentioned that are used to make very important world decisions, whether that's, security, economic data, market data, defense related and healthcare data. There's a lot of these very, very sensitive data. So we're creating it every day and it's scaling. And of course, we're creating silicon that can do more and more powerful things. And we're building quantum computers that can pair up with classical computers and do things that neither can do on their own. And we're seeing a lot of encouraging advancements there. But at the same time, we're also seeing people become more aware and concerned about their privacy. How does this data utilization affect them? How are we making the world a better place and protecting people and protecting information? Because that's a really big thing. And that's something companies like yours were looking for to be the difference makers, to be the companies that are bringing the next answers to these types of solutions. And speaking of that, I kind of mentioned a handful of different industries. I talked about, healthcare, defense, financial services. We talked about media. You guys, are in these themes. You have what you're called 4 vertical themes. So within your 7 key focus areas, you've got vertical themes that are sort of contextually tied to these big trends in global transformation, digital transformation. Talk a little bit about how you see these different trends impacted by different industrial applications.
That's a great question. I hope I can answer that well. Well, look, for instance, like a trusted society. I think one of the key areas within that trusted society is about like a natural disaster. How can how do we kind of best predict this kind of a disaster with all the datas associated? So either it could be flood or like an earthquake. Utilizing data will bring the people to kind of predict in a better manner. So that's one area. The second point is about like a power grid. how do we kind of make it more efficient in transforming the electricity across all the cities? So I think in this type of examples, more and more people are utilizing data to predict what's going to happen or derive efficiency. And I think that does help a lot of SDG issues across the point. One point about Fujitsu is that we have been working on this open source community as a founder of Linux Foundation. So we kind of believe this open source, a secure open source is very important for this kind of a data aggregation and data usage. So that's one area. How do we best leverage the relational database to kind of deliver result? That's one area that we are working very closely.
So let me get a little more granular, Yoshi. I want to talk about cloud because that's a massive macro trend. And some of the things we're talking about are, high performance compute. We're talking about quantum. These are big things, and a small fraction of very, very sophisticated enterprises are adopting these. Cloud, though, is a macro trend. It is every company on the planet is looking at cloud, and the cloud journeys for every business is somewhat unique, right? You've got public cloud, you've got private cloud, you got hybrid cloud. Of course, we're seeing about a third, maybe a quarter or so of workloads are now fully in the public cloud. Most companies have a very diverse mix with a large majority still on-prem, meaning the advent of the hybrid cloud is really everything. And most companies are thinking about this every single day. And so we've got this increasing adoption of hybrid cloud. The public cloud providers are going after it. The software companies are going after it. The on-prem and OEMs are all going. Everybody's got a solution for it. You guys, thinking open source really play well. You can play in any space because your technology kind of goes wherever. It's got great mobility, I'll say. But what do you guys sort of think about when you think about the ideal or the essential cloud journey? What are the important features and considerations?
Yeah, when we talk about the hybrid IT design, I think more and more enterprises kind of more concerned about how do they kind of maintain the security in the modernization. And another area is making sure that utilization of container. So security and utilization of container, it's not a simple lift and shift, but it's about more of keeping security. And once the data is in the open source, making sure that it's in the concept of designing once and deploying anywhere. And also another key factor is about software anywhere. Being able to utilize data, utilize different application software to kind of quickly get output from variety of data. I think that's very important for the open source. And again, talking about the open source, it's about collaborative innovation. How do we kind of work with different enterprise customers, making sure this open source community is leveraged and we work together for the new technology. I think that's very important for the open source.
So let's get a little more in depth about Fujitsu and your role in the open source ecosystem. Talk to me a little bit about the strategic value add that you guys have at Fujitsu with Enterprise Postgres.
So Fujitsu's Enterprise Postgres is basically like a 4 elements that we say it's a differentiator against a proprietary database. So 1, it's about security. 2, it's about availability. And 3, performance. And again, 4 point is portability and automation. So one factor about security is the fact that many of the governmental institutions, and not only U.S. government, but also environmental agency in London or UK, and also a financial institution in Japan, they view this Fujitsu Enterprise Postgres as one of the very secured tool for the modernization. Again, it's because it does include data encryption, log encryption, and internal communication channel encryption. So these are the all very important elements in terms of security. Then I'll just kind of carry on. But talking about the availability, second point, I think one of the key factors about the fear of data loss, making sure that there's no data loss within this process of modernization. That's why we have built a framework that we kind of give an automated failover and recovery process within the FEP. So that's the second point, talking about availability and resilience. And another third point is about the performance. We talked this about being able to manage the complex queries. And within this in-memory columnar index, we do ensure like a quick queries are being processed very quickly. The fourth point, it's about the portability and automation. It's about we do provide the multi-architecture platform that accommodates AMD64 and S390X. So these type of things are very important. One of the very important point is that we are providing enterprise framework, which again, the data is managed in a very secured manner, making sure that this open source is managed in a very adequate manner within this framework. Does that answer your question, Daniel?
Yeah, I think you covered it. You covered it pretty thoroughly. I think it might be worthwhile, though, too, just for everyone out there. This isn't new. What you're doing for open source and the open source community. I mean, you've been in the database business for what, almost 3 decades. You've been contributing 30 years.
30 years, yes.
Yeah, so just a little bit longer than you and I have been around, right? You know, a couple of 20 somethings that we are.
Right.
And though, in all serious though, you know, and you've been contributing to the open source database for close to 20 years. So, you know, this isn't something that you've just recently gotten into. And I think this also speaks to the vision that you guys have as an organization, is that you've been seeing this onslaught of data, the proliferation, the exponential growth as something that's needed to be solved well before any of us were thinking public cloud, long before any of us were thinking about cloud databases and you know, ETL systems and Apache. I mean, you're going back long before early day into this space, and you were building this because this is what was coming, and you guys had that sort of foresight to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think again, well, we've been in this kind of open source industry for more than 20 years, and again, the key factor is that we've been the heart of Fujitsu is around computing. It's about data. So across all the organization, we kind of think through how do we leverage this open source to kind of ensure that the customers or like even the people utilizing the data is able to kind of derive more results using this data. So it's not about just like I talked about like a TCO. It's not about just cost optimization. It's about like making sure that the people are freely able to utilize the data in a rightful manner so that they can achieve more.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the name of the game, right? It's we've I think come to the conclusion societally that the data we need to solve a lot of challenges is there. But then everything from how that data is organized, the schema of the data, the availability, right? Having the right set of software to make that data available. And then, of course, hardware. There's a lot of solutions being built right now to deal with the fact that we need more data to be available, you know, kind of warm memory and hot memory versus cold storage, which is, again, not, it's something that your software benefits from when all that data becomes instantly available. And that's, you know, that's where this world is heading to, because we want to be able to use all the data. And when you got machine learning and AI, but you got data scientists trying to build the most sophisticated and capable algorithms to be able to utilize, well, they're able to utilize subsets of data. It's not just new data. It could be old data. It could be, you know, specifically designed data across many hardware architectures around the world. But how do you make that all available instantly with no latency? Those are the kind of problems I believe, I hope, that you are solving. So let's wrap up here. Let's talk about what I think is something I would definitely like to understand is, you know, there are many people in this space. You guys are not the only company and the only player, but you've been doing this for a long time. You've been very successful. Why are customers landing on Fujitsu for, you know, to solve their particular, you know, needs for data in the open source community?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. I think a few areas. I think it's again comes back to the history of like a 20 years experience in this market. And another point is that we do have like a support organization that we kind of on a global scale we provide all the support from engineering. So that means not a simple lift and shift also, but also we have framework to support the ontology of data. That means you know that many of the enterprise customers, the system or the data is fragmented within the organization. So various tools we have to kind of consolidate those data into one so that the customers can leverage the data as a single source of data. So those type of experience, I think we do have a very good, not only knowledge, but a kind of trust from the customer. And that is the reason why we do have like a mission critical within Japan, like a financial institution and all those kind of a public sector customers. They rely on Fujitsu to manage the database to our side. So I think that's one of the key advantage. And again, one of the fundamentals of open source is that we do not want to kind of do a vendor lock-in. It's an open source. So that means the customer, they can kind of churn out and still like leverage the open source data in a different form if they want to kind of utilize that. So we have a kind of system of like providing the contract in the base of subscription, then like monthly or annual subscription. So I think for the customer, it's easier to kind of use and they can still like utilize the data, even though they churn out. So that's another element. I think they kind of rely on Fujitsu for that purpose.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of success, and that certainly warrants a little bit of the ability to talk about some of these big wins, big customers. At the same time, I know it's an ambitious company that wants to continue to win customers on all parts of the world. And of course, having the chance to talk to you today gives me a lot of reason to believe that that's something that stands to happen in your future, Yoshi. I appreciate you taking the time, kind of running me through the business, the broader picture and vision of Fujitsu, as well as talking a little bit more about your contributions to open source in the database community, some of the differentiators of the company, and then of course why your customers are adopting. So, Yoshi Takahashi, Fujitsu, thanks so much for joining me here on the Futurum Tech Webcast. We got to have you back. We got to talk more about how this is advancing in the next year.
Okay. Thank you so much, Daniel. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, there you have it. We had Yoshi Takahashi with Fujitsu. Great opportunity to learn a little bit more about both A, Fujitsu, the company, and B, open source database and how Fujitsu is participating in that space and what's going on and the challenges that companies are facing. If you like what you heard here, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you back. And check out those show notes. We'll make sure that there's more so you can learn more about what Yoshi had shared with me. And then, of course, more overall on the show and all of the interviews that we do here. For this episode, though, it's time to say goodbye. So thank you very much for tuning in. See you later.